This podcast is brought to you by CatholicCulture.org, where you can find a huge amount of free content, from news and commentary to our liturgical calendar to our library of countless Catholic articles and church documents. But you can get even more free content if you become a Catholic Culture subscriber. All you have to do is give us your name and email address, and you can start getting one or more of our email newsletters, access to our free ebooks, and best of all, if you subscribe, you'll get access to our upcoming series of professionally produced Catholic audiobooks, starting with the writings of the Church Fathers. We're going to start putting those out in October, and they're going to be really great, so please go to CatholicCulture.org/newsletters to subscribe now. Again, that's CatholicCulture.org/newsletters. Welcome to the Catholic Culture Podcast, dedicated to the Holy Family. I'm Thomas V. Miras. Today I'm speaking with the great indie rock band the Duskwhales about their new EP, Take It Back, and their whole career over the past 10 years. Hey everybody, my guests today are good friends of mine, the indie rock band the Duskwhales. If you have been listening from the very beginning of this podcast, you may remember that I interviewed their drummer, Chris Baker, way back in episode 5 about their last EP, Hospital Dreams, and the occasion for this interview is their new EP, Take It Back. But we're not just talking about that, because they're coming up on their 10th anniversary as a band, and I wanted to sort of do a career retrospective because they've made a lot of very different sounding music over the years, and I think it's worth taking a look at. Overall, I would say they have a very melodic sound, vocal harmonies that harken back to the Beatles and the Beach Boys and other groups from the 60s and 70s, and they have kind of a unique organ-heavy instrumentation that sets them apart from contemporary rock bands. But it's the melody that I focus on in the title of the episode, and the loss of melody in pop music is something that we discuss in this. In this interview, you'll hear a lot of clips and a few full songs from their discography, and we'll start before the conversation begins with a track off their new EP, which is titled Fight Back.
If all we are is children at heart, and sometimes we just get torn apart like two dumb doves in the reach of just of some animal. But if you can't fight back, then I'll fight back. Oh yeah. If you can't fight back, then I'll fight back. Oh yeah. If you can't fight back, then I'll fight back. Oh yeah. If you can't fight back, then I'll fight back. Oh yeah. Yeah, here we are, stuck in this world.
Hey guys, it's great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Can you guys just identify yourself, put a name and an instrument to the voice?
I'm Seth. I sing and I play guitar.
My name's Brian, and I play keyboards and I sing harmonies.
My name's Chris. I play drums and I sing harmonies.
I guess we both sing lead as well at times.
They both sing lead. They don't know what they're talking
we
about.
sing.
So you guys are basically in your 9th year as a band, right?
It's sort of like our 10th year, right?
9 or 10, yeah. We started in 2010, so it's kind of the turn of the decade. We're coming up on 10, yeah.
Great. Yeah. So it's interesting because, you started in high school. You were all, 15 or so at the time? 14, 15?
I think I would have been in middle school, actually, still. I think I was in 8th grade. And
Wow. So obviously it's unusual for that kind of band to last that long, at least under the same name. Some people have bands in high school and then some of the same guys kind of continue on with another slightly different band, but it's kind of the same core group or whatever. But
Right.
yeah. So do you think that you have an arc overall that you can identify as far as like the band's progress, not just in terms of style, but like the band itself? Is there kind of an overall trajectory that you see looking back?
Kind of like a downward spiral, I would say. Just plummeting.
If you reverse it, that's the downward spiral reverse.
No, I mean, yeah, definitely. Like in high school, we were just goofing around, but I mean, now we're still goofing around, but it's like, I don't know.
We call ourselves professionals.
Yeah, like we goof around professionally now.
It seems as though friendship plays a greater role in your lyrics than it might in another band's lyrics. It seems like a recurring theme, and some of the lyrics that I find the most poignant in your songs are related to friendship.
Right on.
That's very true. Yeah. I don't know. A lot of the songs that people may think are about girls are usually just about each other.
Yeah, like one of the yeah.
Brian always says that it's almost like being in a relationship or like being in a marriage practically. Just the idea of like, we've been together for so long, we've kind of been, through so much together. We've really grown up together. So it's like,
it's almost like being in a band.
Yeah, it's kind of like being in a band. It's like we've, been through some thick and thin stuff that like, it just seems like, we can kind of take things as they come, and it won't like, obviously we don't always get along and get under each other's skin and stuff like that. But it's like, there's such a strong core foundation that like, we work through stuff, and it's like, there's always just this urge to create more and like, work together on stuff that it's like, there's always just more to be done and to challenge each other and things like that. So yeah, like you said, the friendship it runs deep, 10 years is a long time to be goofing around.
You guys are all Catholic, and you all met attending Seton High School in Virginia. And there's obviously, an element of growing in your faith as you get older as well that plays into your friendship. It plays into your relationship with music and the way that you work together. Are there any like fundamental things that you've learned in that light, in either direction, like how you're working with music as a band has influenced the way you approach your faith and vice versa?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always said that, being in a band with, these guys who are also like-minded about their faith and their morals has always kept us like accountable, because since we started in like early high school, I mean, Seth wasn't even in high school yet, we were just we were still developing, as human beings. And so like going through high school is like when a lot of people will start like experimenting with drugs and like, getting into all sorts of trouble. But we got into like very, very little trouble because we had this band going, and we didn't want to like, I didn't want to be embarrassed by getting into something bad,
Strictly misdemeanors.
Right. Exactly.
That was actually our first band name.
Really?
No, that's pretty good though, right?
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, I think it's worth noting. I don't think we've ever mentioned this, that I'm actually Seth's confirmation sponsor. So I have like an even like I know I have like a whole other level of responsibility.
How could they have allowed that?
Even if the band did split, Brian is still bound to me by that. It's true. Indelible.
That's fascinating, but I don't know if the sponsor is like a indelible mark on the soul, but
I think I don't know if it's indelible, but it's definitely,
It's delible.
He's stuck with me.
It's important.
Like,
Well, you could pick another sponsor at any time.
Yeah. I'm over here, guys.
as soon as Pepsi finds us.
So Seth is like slightly younger than you guys, right?
Yeah, we're all a grade apart. So I guess when the band started, Seth would have been in 8th grade.
Mhm.
Brian was in 9th and I was in 10th. So, I mean, you went to Seton, so it's like such a small school that like everybody knew each other. So
Sure.
your circle of friends could encompass people from lots of different classes. But
Sometimes
Yeah,
it's a
weirdly
triangle of
that
friends.
that wasn't my experience, strangely, but I think that I was just a virtuoso at keeping my social circle as small as possible.
right. Yeah.
I can attest to that. I mostly just hung out with Brian and Chris.
Yeah, so how has it influenced your approach to playing together?
Just going back to that point of like, I feel like there's definitely something to the fact that like, I wonder if we all were like in the same class, if it would have like worked out as much. Cause it's like the fact that we didn't have as much time in school where we'd be together, it's like we're all in different classes where it's like at the end of the day, it's like, we'd hang out when we could and things like that. So that like the time we spent working on music and things, it felt like much more special,
Right. And like Austin, who was our bass player, back in high school, was in my grade, and now he's not in the band anymore.
Yeah, it ended up not working out. I think that the gap year really, there's something to that.
On it.
Yeah.
It's the whole
That's
idea of,
interesting.
like, it's just like you said, you're still developing, like you need that space a little bit. Like it's like high school dating. It's like, it's rare that it works out, it's like you need that time to like gestate and things like that. So I don't know about this tangent I'm going on, but I never really thought about that before. But yeah, the fact that, we're all a year apart, it's like, I wonder if that ended up, being a factor in our longevity or anything. But anyways, what was your question?
With writing
No,
music,
my
though,
question was more about how like the faith has influenced your approach to playing together as a band.
Got it.
We had some pretty cool conversations like early on, like in high school and stuff, about like what it means to be an artist, and what it means to be like a servant to God, by being an artist, and like he is the artist and we're just the instrument, And so I feel like that's something that a lot of kids in high school, like a lot of high school bands aren't thinking, or talking about. And so that was, I would say that was
another thing.
yeah.
So this wasn't really a conscious choice that we made, but so much as like something we started doing and then kind of kept up the pattern was like each release we did, we would like pick a patron saint to kind of go along with that album. So for instance, with the first album, we dedicated to St. Brendan, and then the next one, it was to St. Martha, and then St. Francis of Assisi, and then Therese of Lisieux. So it kind of like, we ended up collecting all these, different patrons that we could evoke each time. And so every time we play a show, we would, when we try to remember to do a band prayer before we play our set. So we'd have this new saint to add to the litany and things like that. So
I'm really
That
just
is
trying to
cool.
get the litany down.
yeah, just trying to get as much, people looking out for us as we can. So yeah, we've got a pretty good crew up there under the Duskwhale banner right now. But
We'll have to get some cards made.
yeah, some holy cards that we can sell at the merch table.
I think that might be sacrilege.
I don't know.
Or something.
No, maybe it's a good idea. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good way to spread the idea.
We'll work.
That's pretty much the same as what we're doing with selling our albums because we put the saint names on all of them.
True. Plus, there's in Sorrowful Mysteries, there's literally a rosary. So anyone that's taken home a
Right.
copy of Sorrowful Mysteries,
Yeah, that one's special because
if you
it's
haven't taken home a copy, please take home a
dedicated.
copy.
as well as the self-titled, there's an icon of Saint Therese right there on the
And
front.
so is St. Martha is the cover
Yeah.
of Martha. It's hidden in plain sight. It's kind of, it's like,
And St. Brendan.
yeah, that's
And
true.
your latest is St. Jude, right?
St. Jude, yeah.
So, all right. Yeah, that's all super interesting that you were so conscious about it that early on. I would have thought that would be something that developed maybe, in your early 20s or something like that. But
No, I mean, we were going to Seton, and
Sure.
so our faith, we were practicing our faith every day. So it was such a big part of our lives, and of course, we learn about from Mr. Heisler, like write about what you know,
Exactly. So I was going to say,
Oh, cool, right
write
on.
about what you know. And it's
Yeah.
like you're just surrounded by icons and stuff like that.
right? So of course we wrote about our faith.
that's cool. Yeah.
Or like even hearing like a phrase, like I think the way that I started the song Festival off of Martha Martha, I went to some sort of special mass. I can't remember what it was, but I heard the phrase all the quick and dead. And I was like, wow, I've never
Right.
heard that phrase in a mass before. I was like, well, I've got to like gotta turn that into a song immediately. I was like, that's it's just such a poetic line.
Yeah, it's interesting too because that's like a English way of talking.
Yeah.
It's like kind of an archaic. It sounds like something you'd hear in like an Anglican liturgy or something where they kept that old language, because now they would say the living and the dead.
Yeah.
You know, in a modern Catholic liturgy typically. But yeah, that's something I've noticed in your lyrics. There are just these occasional like Britishisms. I feel like Chris is probably responsible for most of them. I don't know why I think that.
No, you're right.
Britishisms, I like that.
It's like when you're singing about like rats in the hedge.
Sure.
That just sounds very British for some reason.
No, Chris will also sing in a British accent.
Well, I
sometimes.
mean, most of
we
the
all do. Though.
yeah, all of our favorite artists are British, so it's like, and they were trying to imitate, American singers, so it's kind of like a role reversal sort of a thing of like,
Yeah.
the Beatles were trying to sound like Elvis and Little Richard and stuff, and now it's like everyone's imitating them. So it's it's a good back and forth game of tennis across the pond, but
It really shows our love.
it shows our love.
Tennis.
Right. Yeah, well, Festival happens to be one of my favorites of your, probably maybe even my favorite song of your early output, like before your second album.
Wow, that's cool.
And I always did like that opening line.
All quick and dead went to festival where they danced and hovered above farmers, and the daughter smiled like being coy was new, but it surely wasn't. So make that moment today. No, I don't wanna fight, 'cause I can never kill. No, I don't wanna spin, 'cause I can never stop. No, I don't wanna fight, 'cause I can never kill. No, I don't wanna. No, I don't wanna. Calico minks were twirling silver rings, and the sight just pouring while sight just burning.
Let's talk about your first album, Cut Purse.
It was dedicated to my brother Brendan, who had passed away the year previously. And so actually, Cut Purse was the name of a band he had started with his girlfriend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's kind of just a reference to him.
So what's going on here? You have a bass player, and this is your first album, and it's pretty eclectic. It's a little bit all over the place, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were just so excited to finally get to record. Like, we've been making demos for so long up into that. I guess I had just graduated from high school, and it was the summer that we went up to our friend RJ's house up in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. He had a little home studio, so we had these 10 songs. And we were just so excited to record them, and like we didn't really know what we were doing. We were kind of just figuring out how the recording process worked. So I think it really shows in the songs that have this kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say. They're just like,
They're a little childish.
yeah,
sometimes,
it's got like weird little things in there, but also it's got like little moments. It's like, I would never have thought to have done that. It's like, it's weird that it came out that way. It's just, it doesn't even seem like something that we made. I guess we have enough distance from it that it just seems like something that like, that's strange that we did that.
Let me correct that. They're very childlike, not childish, but there's a lot of things that are pretty childlike on that. Go ahead.
There's an innocence about like what we're doing, not like an ignorance, but like we're just like we don't know what we're doing exactly. Like we have a vague idea, but I think there was even like after we put that album out, we were trying to get reviews, and someone did a review of it, and they're just like, it's a really funny album, and I think I was just furious about that for like a long
Right?
time.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
when you listen back to it, it's like, this is a funny album. That's not totally bad.
like at the time, like we weren't trying to do anything like funny or goofy, but like there's definitely some like sort of jovial elements to it. Like you called it the bop ba period, because there's a lot of that where it's like, what are we gonna do here? Yeah, we're just gonna say bop ba. But at the same time, there's stuff like Starberry and You Live in Houses where it's like it gets kind of heavy and strange all of a sudden. So
You're an eclectic band, but this, your first couple albums are particularly kind of like all
Grab
over
bags.
the place stylistically. And are there some traits you can see though in that first album, Cut Purse, that kind of have stuck with you, or were kind of an indication of what was to come?
I really think in the song Starberry, you get an indication of that would like show up later on our self-titled album, the Duskwhales, with just like an organ-led song You even get I think 3-part harmony at one point towards the end of the song, and then a weird outro with some kind of fireworky sounding keyboards, which are really cool. I think. What else?
I think it's probably
Brian's first.
Yeah.
Brian's first organ solo,
That's true.
which is really cool. Got a
It's
lot
probably
of those
it's
now.
probably worth noting, like the early albums between Cut Per Swim and even into the self-titled a little bit, we had not quite settled into each playing the same instruments on all the tracks. So like those early ones,
right.
like I would have, a guitar part or something like that, and Brian might have be playing drums on some songs. So we were kind of jumping around a little bit. That was kind of our shtick for a while. We would, even during our live sets, kind of just move around and like, who's playing drums right now? Like it could be anyone. It was kind of like a musical chairs situation, which is like extremely unprofessional, but it was part of our thing of like, everyone kind of did a little bit of everything at some point, but
Sure.
it took us a while to kind of lock into our set instruments, and then it makes it much, much simpler that way. So that kind of is probably a part of why it's so eclectic, I would say.
Martha, you're so anxious, worried over all these many things. Mary Magdalene, the girl is crying, tears are running down his feet. You could tell me anything, I will listen to your words. You could take me anywhere, I will always follow you there.
Next, we have your first EP, Martha Martha. This is your first kind of overtly Catholic
Definitely.
work.
Yep.
So what's
Moving on.
yeah? What's the connection there to Saint Martha?
Was that like the reading of the day recently or something?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to like you taking all the quick and the dead line. It's like, we're going to a Catholic school and going to mass on Sunday, all of these lines that are kind of just like in your head, and it's just, it bears repeating sometimes. So we just took that one little one, and then it kind of just became the basis of the song. But it also kind of relates back to the fact that like we weren't quite settled into our specific roles yet. So it was kind of a weird instance of like Brian and I ended up being the lead vocals on that, kind of singing this unison part. And then when we played it live, we would both be playing tambourines, like kind of for no particular reason other than like it was just kind of based on that guitar riff. And then Austin would have been playing drums. So it kind of became the spectacle when we played it live. At the end, we'd be freaking out, and then we'd throw the tambourines on the ground and just smash them, and people would be into that. So we went through a number of tambourines from that period. It was always fun to, yeah, that was about as hard rock and roll as we got, smashing our tambourines.
This song is kind of stands out. It's one of your songs that kind of is on its own in terms of the style and the texture of it.
Yeah, it's very, very riff based, which I feel like we don't often
Yeah, it's very true.
do. It's more kind of chordal and melodic.
That does make me think it's remarkable because most modern music is not super melodic, modern pop music. It's remarkable that from your very first album, you were already writing, some really good melodies. And I guess that's a function of, a gift from God, but also just that you were listening to a lot of kind of old school melodic tunes.
Right.
Yeah, a gift from God, also a gift from the Beatles.
Yeah.
Via God, I suppose.
Via God. Yeah, no.
It's always been about the melody for us, I think. That's always been like the biggest part. I remember because I was just like exploring songwriting, obviously in the beginning of our band, we all were, but like I felt behind with like Seth and Chris. And I remember one time we were like working on a song. I don't remember what song it was, but like we were working on the chord progression. And I was like, guys, I don't really know about this chord progression. It seems kind of generic. And Chris was like, nah, it's about the melody that we're going to write. And like, that's stuck with me ever since. Like all my life, I've always thought about that one line. Like, no, but it's about the melody that we're going to write.
Interestingly though, for me now, it's like the melody is important, but now it's almost more about the harmony.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's like, even if the melody is only okay.
It's like, no, it's all about the
always
melody. But
change
hey,
it.
check out this harmony I just wrote.
No, that's actually a really hip statement,
Yeah.
Because I would be tempted to say the same thing as you, Brian. I would be like, well, every song has this chord progression, or like this is just really, really basic. But there's a bajillion different things you can do under the same chord progression.
Exactly.
Like how everyone has two hands. It's like, everyone has two hands and it's generic like that. But so what you do with those hands? It's true. It's true.
I like that.
Some people just like squander away and not use those hands to do anything. Or people like, build amazing structures.
Yeah.
I'd also make an argument not everyone has two hands.
Okay, Chris.
Just being
and
inclusive.
I'm very thankful for that now.
Don't be such a social justice warrior.
Thankful for having two hands.
I know. I'm very thankful that we've always been so melody centric, because now when I go to write a song, I always hear the melody first, and it was never that way before, and it's so much easier now to hear melodies, which then, just allows you to be more open to what God is giving you, because it's so, you just got to listen, which is something that I wanted to mention about Martha Martha was that, like, sure, like, the idea to just start writing about, this specific part where Jesus says, Martha, Martha, just came to us randomly. But like, who's to say it didn't come from God? And so, what to us may have just been like, we didn't really give it much thought, God's been planning it, and it's a much, much bigger thing.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, why would you manage it to stay together so long and keep growing as musicians? Right. I mean, there's so many, there's many human factors you can point to, but, the culture is not really conducive to a band making more than one good album.
That's very true.
So,
or a band making even just one good song and then just cashing it in.
Totally.
Little boy, I was a mermaid, said I want to take a walk by the seashore. I don't want to go. Mother says you gotta get out of the water. Your fingers touch races and no one bothers taking you back home. I just want to swim. I just want to swim. I just want to swim.
Next is your second album, Swim.
Oh, Swim.
Yeah, it's so, you've got politics, you've got The Hobbit.
What more could you ask for?
You've got just like grim northern vibes.
Yeah, that album was interesting because, like, again, this was recorded at the same place as the first two. So by this point, we had a slightly more of an idea of like what we were doing, but like still had like a long way to go in terms of like, we weren't thinking about like tempos or anything like that. We were just like, I feel like we had an urgency to like play everything almost as fast as possible because that's kind of how we did it live. So it was like, everything was kind of just like, we didn't do too many takes, and it was kind of like working backwards where it's like, we do the drums first, and even if it's like extremely fast, we would just kind of like go with it and end up having to Seth play the swim riff at a tempo he's like never done before and things like that. So it was kind of like we learned by doing it. And then, we originally wanted to record 14 tracks, and the producer was like, hey, let's do 4. And we're like, okay, 8. So it's like, we picked the ones we wanted to do. It wasn't like we were trying to make a coherent album. So it is all over the place.
Yeah. And I feel like there's, also something to say about like Pope Francis was like, he was still like a new Pope at that point. And he had that like iconic line of like, young people swim against the tide. And so swim against the tide was kind of like our motto for a little bit. We had it like on our stickers that we would sell at merch tables. So, people had like the bumper sticker of the Duskwhales, swim against the tide. And then we ended up dedicating that album to St. Francis of Assisi.
Say you're looking for me everywhere, but nowhere to find. Ain't gonna stop a new soldier. Ain't got time for my ages. Ain't gonna stop a new order.
So that was a bit of New Soldier.
That's a Chris song. That's a song that Chris wrote. So we're all just kind of following his lead, and he was just kind of taking us through it. It's very roller coastery because it starts off very slow, and then it speeds up, and then it slows back down, but not to like the original, like the first tempo that it starts off with. And then it goes into a whole bunch of other sections. That has a lot of sections in it.
Yeah, it's just another example of like, we were kind of all, writing songs and everyone was kind of trying to find their voice. So that was just a like instance of like, what can we do here to like make it sort of different? Because like Seth had sort of established his sort of style, and that was kind of the main focus of what we were going for. So I was trying to figure out like, what can I do that will be sort of a little bit different? And then that's also the first instance where we had Brian doing a nice little keyboard lick, where there's not a lot of keyboard on those earlier albums. Like, so you have, Sleep Girl and Communist Now are kind of good examples of where the piano kind of became prevalent. So New Soldier is another example where like a little keyboard lick becomes a big part of the song, but also the harmonies in the verse are kind of nice, but it is kind of all over the place. And there's a little cowbell break, which I don't think we've done anything like that since then. So yeah.
I wanted to ask about that guitar chord that's over the verse. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What is it, like a second or something? It's got like a suspended second.
I'd found some sort of voicing that I liked, and I was just like trying to put it in as many different ways as I could. Yeah, I think a lot of times, starting with a melody is important, but also like if you find a good chord that you like, you just roll with it, and then you kind of, mess around with how can you fit that in as many places as possible. So I've definitely approached songwriting in that way. So that's a good example of how it can work sometimes.
Well, it's something that I wanted to ask you guys. This would apply to the vocal harmonies too, because sometimes you do have some really interesting harmonies that again kind of go out of the domain of what you find in most rock or pop music, and you've got that nice suspended fourth on Swim, I think, as well. The da 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 that part. And I just kind of wondering like how much theory knowledge you guys had at that point, or if it was really just kind of messing around on your instrument and finding cool sounds.
Yeah, I think at that point it was a lot of just like using our ear and kind of just doing what we heard.
Yeah, I'll give major props to Seth, who always has been like probably our influence in terms of like can pick out harmonies and just like know what will sound cool. So it's now that we kind of have grown a bit and we try to do more stuff live, it puts Brian and I on the spot more to like try and fill out the sound a little bit more. Whereas Seth was writing and recording songs when he was such a wee lad that like his harmonies just come so naturally to him. So I've always just been imitating him.
I have no concept of theory. I go solely based off the ear. I've tried to pick up a little bit from like Brian or anyone that will talk to me about it over and over again, so I will retain it in my thick skull, but I have no concept of theory whatsoever, which is horrible. And but it's true. So a lot of it is going off of ear, just like what feels right, because who wants a boring song?
That's a great attitude.
It's such, I don't know, if you put out a boring song, it's just like, what a waste of time. And a waste of your talent.
Seth, I actually asked you this question many years ago when you were after a show at Epicure Cafe in Fairfax when you were still playing there.
I know what you're going to say, actually. Yeah, go for it.
And I remember you said something about like you would just test out, you would learn about like cool voicings and stuff by just like building stuff on top of each other in like
GarageBand, probably.
GarageBand.
Yeah. I
it was just a trial and error thing, I guess.
It's a lot of trial and error. I mean, I like to think that I've kind of not perfected, but I'm polishing my way of writing or, my songwriting style or stuff like that. But
so maybe now you don't have to do like 13 layers before you decide on the ones. You might have more of an intuitive voice of like, okay, these are the notes I'm going to go for.
Exactly.
Right?
You guys have, that harmonic foundation from the Beatles in terms of like more classical harmony and chord progressions and things like that. But there's also these cool voicings that I mentioned. And, it just occurs to me, I don't know if you would attribute it to this at all, but that's something you see in a lot of like early 90s, like alt rock as well, that they're using voicings and chord progressions that are just like a little weirder than what you would hear in the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Or like in some Nirvana songs, there's like a Lydian thing, or just things, I don't know how much these people were thinking in terms of theory themselves, but that is something that kind of jumps out at you from like the grunge and the alternative rock of a certain era, that there's just a little bit more experimentation with the harmony and kind of weird suspended chords and stuff. I don't know if that's something that inspired you at all.
Definitely Nirvana. Nirvana is like, they've always had like, when they do have harmonies, like it's always really, really cool. Plus just the way that like Dave Grohl and Kurt Cobain's voice like match together. There's some cool, you can like hear just the audio of like their voices singing, like they match up perfectly and just like complement each other in such ways.
I think Radiohead too is another good example. That's a huge influence.
Coming up on was there a single first? Was the next thing an album or a single?
Straight to an album here.
Mm-hmm.
Same year as Swim, actually. We put out the
just
self-titled.
6 months later.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you manage that?
I don't know.
I was out of high school then.
We graduated, yeah.
I think Swim took a long time to come out, right? Didn't we record it the year previously?
Yeah, so it was recorded, in the months leading up to that. So it had been kind of a struggle where we'd drive up to Pennsylvania to record, but luckily this one was done here in Virginia, so we had it was more accessible, and we kind of went through it quicker, and the process was a little bit more expedited. But it just happened to be released in the same year as Swim. So,
and it was also in the time when like Austin had pretty much like totally separated himself from the band.
We were all out of high school by this point, right?
Yeah.
So
right, were you out of high school, Seth?
When we were recording the self-titled, I had
2014
just graduated.
Yeah. This was kind of the sweet tea era for Seth. He was walking around with his
it's a green tea.
Yeah.
Arizona green tea paraphernalia.
A free agent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we
Still
were
waiting for that sponsorship.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, because it's such a drastic sound change from, Swim to the self-titled. But
Totally.
I mean, I know for me personally, I started listening to The Doors that summer.
The 4 years of the Doors.
Yeah, the Doors.
So this kind of initiates like a really big development in the band.
Definitely, yeah, because like, I mean, as you can hear on like the first two tracks, Harvest and I Won't Be Your Son, are so organ based. I Won't Be Your Son has that like psychedelic keyboard riff that's kind of reminiscent of like Light My Fire. And so it definitely did throw us in like a 60s, 70s kind of vibe. And that's where I feel like the Beatles really started to like take off within us, because it's like, okay, we're right there in it.
This was also when Austin had, I think, officially left the band by this point.
Yeah.
So we were kind of still figuring out how are we going to, rework our sound as a three-piece. Like having the organ was a big part of it, but also like, writing our own bass parts now and thinking in terms of like, okay, we don't have someone to like do this for us. Like, what do we want to do with the bass lines, and how are we going to compensate for not having a bass live? So I feel like it's heavier by nature of like, we were just kind of like trying to fill more sound, adding more harmonies and things like that.
It was a lot of just, I know, because for those bass parts, it was a lot of just like, we'd start to write like a bass riff, and we're just like, oh man, we better just like keep it to the root note, because like we won't have that live.
You don't want to miss it too much.
Because this was before I started like playing the bass parts with my left hand.
This was actually before Brian's left hand had joined the band. It's just been
Some people
just in his pocket for those first few years. Yeah, like it's just the one hand for a while. One hand Majewski.
Do we have that in stereo? Chris and I both just sang that at the same time.
This is definitely a favorite, and there's kind of two strands to it. There's like, it's definitely got your most kind of rock and roll tunes on it, in my opinion, in terms of just like heavy kind of riff based. Poor Eliza, I'm a big fan of, for example.
Oh, yeah, we were
Peggy Sue.
Yeah.
And then there's also these really pretty melodies that, again, you don't really hear this in most rock bands. It definitely harkens back to the Beach Boys a bit. Something like Holy Motors or Honeycomb. Those both have really nice melodies. Holy Motors is that still your longest song?
I think so. Longest song, also the longest album.
Yeah, I think Honeycomb is definitely in my top 5 Duskwhales favorite songs.
That's classic.
It's got a really nice melody to it, a really nice development.
We did a little doo-wop thing in there, sort of.
Yeah, I wish we had just the vocals from that so we could listen back to that. But that was a fun one. Just to show that our writing was developing, not just like of the music, but lyrically. We actually, for that one, we all wrote. We would like write like different ideas of what we thought like the lyrics of the verse would be or the chorus would be, and then we would like compare it with each other, and maybe someone had like a solid line or someone had like a great word here and then we just kind of like patchwork it together.
Honey, cast your comb into the ravine. Benevolent tablets melt my sadness away. Happy days must end, sunny days begin. Back when best memory runs,
stylistically, like what we're doing vocally on that album is very different. I don't know. I feel like the first like 3 releases we had, I don't know, a lot of the vocals didn't like stretch too far, or at least like stretch too far, like in a fluid way up to like the higher register. But I think that like album shows like all of us starting to like stretch our vocal abilities as well as our songwriting and like lyric ability.
Now you've got a song that relates to your album cover. Your album cover is the peaceful corpus of Saint Therese of Lisieux, surrounded by some freaky-looking dandelions or sunflowers.
Flowers, yeah.
Are they dandelion?
Sunflowers.
They're sunflowers.
Yeah, they're actually from this movie. I think I'm trying to remember what might be from the Czech Republic. I think is where she's from, or Ukraine or Russia. I can't remember.
I think it's Russia.
Yeah. Called Blood, Tea, and Red String, which we actually mentioned in Honeycomb in the last verse. But yeah, it's a very weird stop-action claymation movie, and you can actually watch it on YouTube, and it's very, very weird, but I think, I'm always inspired by images, and I think, I don't know, that was a fun album cover to make.
Right, yeah, I think it's worth noting, the first 3 albums, I guess with the exception of Swim, we like did all the artwork ourselves, so like covers, we took a collage of different things. We have the Brendan and the Saint Brendan and all these different little elements. And then Martha was I guess like a screen print that Seth had made. And then with the self-titled, again, it was kind of like a collage, but started with a drawing of the Saint Therese and then the flowers. But yeah, in those early days, we didn't really have any other like artists that we knew of that would do anything for us, or we just wanted to do everything ourselves. We didn't know any better. So we just created all the artwork ourselves.
I liked making the album cover for the self-titled because then I got to cut out of school and have Brian come pick me up.
Yeah.
I have a very fond memory of just leaving school and Brian and making the album cover at Brian's house, or at least the starting sketch.
I remember that. I remember I picked you up and then I just like put you in my room and then I left you alone in there. And like, it was just like, yeah, draw that.
That was locked me in there and said, you can come out when you're finished.
Yeah.
We're going to play this song Young Things, which has a great story behind that. The lyrics are taken to an extent from the writings of Saint Therese, right?
Yeah, I really wanted the song to kind of just be like co-written by Saint Therese. And so yeah, there's lines in it from stuff that she said, like she says something like, if everyone was a rose, springtime would lose its loveliness. And so I really dug that line, so that one's in there. But yeah, it's all over the place. But yeah, I did write one line about how I call her my little sister, and I remember feeling kind of weird about that. And I was like unsure if I wanted to keep that line. And then I was with some friends at a coffee shop, and I wanted to get some coffee, but I didn't have any money. And so I asked this friend if I could borrow some money from her, and she just gave me a bunch of coins that she had in her purse, and it was like a bunch of quarters, and then just one little gold medal of Saint Therese on it, surrounded by flowers. And I flip it over and it says, I am your sister, I will always be with you. And it's like, what? Like, talk about like confirmation, you know?
And then
that's amazing.
The second part of that is when we were working on that song at your house, it just so happened that I guess it was Sean Kerr and his like roommate or something.
Father Sean
Kerr, who at the time was not in the seminary, but he came with a friend to Brian's house. And his friend just so happened to have on his person, was it a first class relic of Saint Therese? Something like that. He just, we were talking to them about the song and we played it for them. And
we had just finished writing.
We didn't know that he had that. And he just happened to be like, yeah, so like, I have this relic on me. And we like freaked out. We're like, whoa, that's wild. You know,
so we blessed all of our instruments with this relic of Saint Therese.
So she kind of kept.
So like the first time that we performed that song for anybody was for Father Sean, his friend Mike, and Saint Therese.
And Hope Gallagher, who's also, when she entered the church, she took the name Therese.
She did.
And we're playing at her wedding next month.
Yeah.
Selfless to death. Have you heard
What was the Relic?
I don't know. I think it was like
Skin or something?
no. I don't know if it was the first class.
Maybe
it might
not.
have been. I feel like it might have been like a thread from Her Habit or something.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably second class, which would make your instruments third class
Right.
relics.
It's just incredible.
Center-as.
Right.
So don't spill beer on them and don't let anybody else do it.
Just coconut water.
I'm still mad because somebody spilled beer on my keyboard at a Halloween gig
Oh,
years
no.
ago.
Brian got bit at a Halloween gig once.
Yeah, Halloween gigs.
You got bit?
Yeah, I did. This girl, she was really drunk and she got up on the stage and was like singing into the microphone. And I told her like, "Hey, you got to get off because we like are about to play a set." And she turned around and bit me like hard.
Ow.
Yeah. Halloween.
That was why you wrote the song about Dracula.
Yeah.
So how do you guys started playing cover shows at this point?
I don't think
No,
so.
no.
No, that came about when we had started playing with Rory O'Donnell for a little while. But that was when you were still in high school though, Seth, right?
I was still in high school.
You were a senior. So we played a couple random ones like at Christendom, and we played like a seat and dance or something here and there. And from that, we kind of like learned all these Beatles covers and stuff and then started doing it on our own. But it wasn't like a regular thing, so much common as we do now. But that's kind of where it started. It was probably around that time, 2013, 2014. But yeah, we took
So
that.
you guys play gigs where you play your own songs, but you also play gigs that are basically cover gigs.
Right.
Yes.
And, it's interesting. I'm not a Beatles expert by any means, but one of the few things that I know about them is that they cut their teeth doing just that.
Exactly. Yeah. So
in Germany.
Hamburg did.
For, I forget how long.
Yeah.
They had a long residency somewhere, I think in Berlin.
in Hamburg. Yeah.
Yeah, Hamburg. So, yeah, I mean, how has that formed you guys as musicians and as songwriters, actually playing the music as opposed to just listening to it?
Definitely helped develop our writing, honestly,
Yeah.
I think. Because, we were already developing that on our own, but then you start playing all these songs by different artists, a lot of them being from the 60s and 70s or 80s. And you start seeing what they're doing and how they made these songs come together and just kind of pop the way that they do. And I don't know, it gives you inspiration. You're like, wow, I want to write something as good or like better than this song.
Yeah, it's really like with learning like learning like a classical piece. Like if you start learning like a piece by Mozart, you really get into his head, you know? I'm sure like you can relate to that and like you see
Sure.
like, what they were thinking when they wrote this tune. So it's, a very similar thing when we just started learning all of these cover songs. Like you got into the head of the Beatles and it's like, oh, okay. So like that's what they were thinking when they like did, this harmony formation or whatever.
Or just what were they thinking when they did this harmony?
Yeah, that too. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys are really kind of, as you're getting into doing these cover bands and stuff, you are kind of getting a more professional mindset. Obviously, that you're a professional if you're playing your own music, out there as well. But there is a particular type of kind of professional skill and attitude that you gain by doing these other gigs.
Yeah, it's kind of like being like a long distance runner because you're playing these gigs for like 3 or 4 hours, and it's just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep going? After like the third set, and you've got a fourth set coming up, and you're just running on almost empty, just running on fumes at that point.
Yeah, I had a friend recently just call us endurance players. And I was like, oh, you're totally right.
That's
I never
pretty
thought
cool.
of that, but it's true. We are like endurance players because we'll play these like 4-hour sets, and sometimes by the end of it, we're exhausted, but sometimes it's like, yeah, we could do another hour if we had to,
And often we do.
Yeah, sometimes we have done the 5th hour and
It's kind of inevitable that you start to like dissociate a little bit while playing these 3 to 4 hour cover
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
gigs.
stories of like when the Beatles were doing those long sets and they'd play for like 6 hours and have, stories of them just like frothing at the mouth, kind of just stomping away, which is like insane, but so funny. And it's like,
Or just being given uppers.
right. Yeah. I mean, they were for sure, they took drugs to get through that period, but it's like the idea of like, because they went through that shaped so much of their longevity and their ability to like, play live without monitors and things like that. So I think playing all these songs for hours and hours and the same ones every night, it's like, it challenges you to like, what can I do to make this more interesting, but still kind of like, respect the song and give the people what they want to hear. But, when you're taking a solo or you do like a little something different to keep the three of us interested. So
You
sometimes
play
we'll
little
be like,
games.
you come up with little things to change it up, but it's fun. Yeah.
So you're that's one of the cool things is you're not Well, first of all, you're not a cover band for one band only, so you're not trying to imitate
No,
the
yeah.
music exactly because you can't. You don't have the same lineup.
Right.
Everything's not molded towards one band's sound. And also, you're a trio, so you actually, I'm sure that you had to mess with the arrangements to make that work, and that was a lesson all in itself in songwriting.
Yeah.
A lot falls on Brian during these cover shows.
Well, it's because I'm holding down the bass, you know. And so it's like I'll either be doing bass and rhythm, you know, or bass and like a lead.
And singing.
Yeah, and singing as well.
How big is your repertoire?
About like 4 hours worth of material.
No, we can do more than that now.
Probably more now, though.
Yeah, there are some songs we haven't played in a while, but we could probably bust them out. For the most part, yeah, it's a good solid like 3 to 4 hours of like songs that will not sound terrible. So, yeah, I don't know how many songs that translates to, but probably like 150 or something like that. But
And you said it's a lot of 50s, 60s through 80s material.
Definitely.
yeah, Beatles is a big part of it, but also, you know, The Cure, the
New Age
Cars.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of modern stuff, MGMT. So we try to cover a lot of different eras and bands that people want to hear. A lot of crowd favorites. You gotta cater to the people sometimes.
One of the things that you guys bring to the table is your consciousness of like the history of, certainly you guys, you know, listen to jazz, you listen to some classical music, but particularly I would say like the last 6 decades or so of pop music, rock and pop music from the United States. You obviously have other influences. I know, Chris, you love bossa nova, Brazilian music, as do I. But you really draw from the whole history, at least through like the 90s for sure. And that's just interesting because you still have your own sound, but so clearly, obviously the Beatles and Beach Boys stuff is clear and the vocal harmonies, but it is a broad range of influence you're drawing from. And there are a lot of bands out there that draw from an earlier decade, but it's very retro and they're clones. I mean, there's 80s clones. They're projecting a certain attitude. There's a band out there that is like an exact clone of Led Zeppelin. I forget their name, but you guys probably knew.
Yeah, we do.
What's that?
Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that retro stuff out there, and that's been big seemingly, I think, since the 2000s. There's been some of that. There was a lot of people like mimicking early 70s hard rock and stuff like that, and now, you know, people doing the 80s stuff.
Yeah, I think that in general, there's kind of a nostalgia wave that's going to come over, you know, the arts in general. Like you see it in movies too. Like
It's like a renaissance.
The 80s craze. Yeah, you could say renaissance, I suppose. But I think there is a tendency to kind of just like, you know, mimic rather than recreate.
Gimmicky.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, to an extent, it's good. You know, you have to like honor the past. And it's fun. You like to hear and see references to things. But at the same time, it's like, you know, at what point do you know, draw the line between, you know, creating something new and then including elements of the past.
Right,
so.
exactly. Because you want to take the good things from the past and like, you know, continue the legacy of like creating new things, you know, not just like totally replicating what's been done before.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like you have a backpack and like you're just like trying to like reach the top of this mountain. Along the way, you're having to like pick up all these things and try and like implement them into your music in a way while also like growing as like an artist yourself and hoping that like one day people will want to implement like the things you have like done.
Seth, I love your analogies.
I'm sorry. I work with analogies.
That's great.
This next one is a favorite of mine, the single Emerald Skates.
Gone, walking again, yeah. Don't you know I'm already dead, yeah. But when you boogie down to see me in the dead of night, and I'm not feeling alright, and then the struggle just stole me back from that night. Ooh, you're feeling alright. I can't take it no more, no more.
And this is still, I wouldn't be surprised if you guys still get requests for this one.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the ones we've definitely gone and reworked a couple different times live and, added various harmonies and tried out like a bunch of different ways just because we've had it for so long now. So we like to make it interesting and challenge ourselves to like come up with something new.
Yeah, there's something really interesting about the energy of that song. It's kind of hard to describe. I don't know, ebullient. I don't know. It's just
I like that.
It's just got this very like. It's just got this very like. It's kind of aggressive in a very like kind of positive way.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely very positive sounding, ebullient music, like you said, but definitely paired with dark lyrics, I'd say, or at least unhappy lyrics.
It's kind of just been the majority of our career.
Yeah, I think we're we're branching out from that though. I think
a little bit, yeah.
At least I know I'm definitely trying to
write more positive songs.
Write more positive songs because it can be really easy just to write something sad. You really don't have to work to make something sad.
Yeah, ever since we've like
because life is sad.
Yeah, I know. Ever since like Cut Purse, we were writing these like happy sounding songs with sad lyrics, and a friend of ours said to us that we were like the monkeys if they were clinically depressed. And so that's actually kind of where the like opening riff for today comes from, because it's the riff for Daydream Believer, but in a minor key, so it's so it's just sad.
They probably were clinically depressed, honestly, at a certain point.
So
probably true.
Just to be real.
I'm like the monkeys if they were autistic.
You're just a monkey.
I'm not going to keep that in there. I have never even listened to the monkeys, so I don't know what that would even mean. But
you could probably skip over the Beatles if you needed to.
Yeah. So yeah, this song, you said there were some interesting stories about it. So this is definitely one of my favorites. I'd love to hear, where that was coming from and what stories are attached to it.
Yeah, well, I think we recorded it in Savannah, Georgia. And that was my first time there. But anyways, so we had to drive all the way down there.
It's like 10 hours.
It's our first time in a real studio, though.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah, we were basically totally out of our element, working with a new producer who we'd never even met before. Just kind of, going down there to try something out. We weren't sure what we were going to do with our next album. So that was kind of like our way to test it out. And so we had this song. But yeah, it was just very strange, going down to this place, and we were kind of going crazy.
The producer, right? The producer that we worked with, he had he wanted a lot of creative control over our song, and we had never experienced anything like that before. And so it kind of put us in this strange mindset. We were kind of really bummed out the whole time. And it's funny, on the drive back from recording that song, we were like,
drive there actually.
No, it was the drive back. We were just like really sad, and we came up with this game called Sad Hour, which would actually end up being like multiple hours, where we would just tell each other like our deepest, darkest secrets, just like things we've never told anybody, or just things that were making us really sad. Like, this is why I have been like sad, this year. And I mean, that just like obviously was huge for our friendship, because we just like broke this wall of like, okay, I'm just not going to hide anything from you guys, And so through our sadness, we actually got like we gained a lot.
God brought something good out of our sadness.
Yeah. And the song ended up.
But nevertheless,
the song was awesome.
Yeah, you successfully recorded this song. He did not grease it up too much.
I love the production on that song. It's very, very interesting because we never played to a click track before. So that's the first time we're playing to a click track. We showed up. We didn't have a bass part. So we stayed up that night writing the bass part.
We slept in the studio too, which was kind of unique. Yeah, so I just remember being in there for like about 2 or 3 days, just kind of waiting around for things to get done, because we wanted to work really quickly. So we kind of had to work at their pace because we weren't in our element or anything like that. But it's such a quick song that I think it's probably one of the shortest ones we've done, at least in terms of singles. But it's also fun because we did that music video with the rollerblading, so that in of itself was a whole other experience of,
out of our element, or at least back to very childish of us.
Yeah, this was like probably the first example of us actually getting like really experimental in the studio, where like we had the idea for some stuff, but also we kind of like tried to, like, I just remember layering harmony after harmony at the end of like, what can we do to make this like really, really thick? So that's,
And sleigh bells.
yeah, the first time we used sleigh bells, which come back again on the song today, but we wanted to bring those in on the chorus to make it a little, give it the little sort of holiday feel
Cheer.
sort of snuck in there. Yeah. So that's probably also taken from like Pet Sounds, I think.
Yeah, we're definitely listening to a lot of Pet Sounds and leading into obviously probably what we'll talk about next, Sorrowful Mysteries. We're definitely listening
Yeah,
to a lot of
speaking of sad hours,
Pet Sounds.
Sorrowful Mystery. Yeah.
Well, yeah, so Sorrowful Mysteries was your fourth and most recent full album, and we did a long interview about this. This is the first audio interview I did for Catholic Culture before the podcast. I'll link to that on the show notes page for this episode. I think that should be catholicculture.org/episode 51. I think this will be. So anybody who wants to go in like real detail about that album can check that out. It's a very amateurish interview because I wasn't planning to use the audio initially. I just kind of ended up using it. But it's a fun conversation, and there's plenty of the music from that album. But we will talk about that a little bit now. This was the first. I mean, like you said, I mean, the single Emerald Skates was your first taste of this, but this was your first like really studio intensive album.
Yeah, well, it's also very interesting because Emerald Skates and Living Room were originally intended to be on that album. And then somewhere in the process of determining what studio we were going to record it at and what producer we were going to use, those songs were actually kind of sectioned off and used as singles.
Right. So I guess the idea was that like we really wanted to, you know, come up with an album where the songs were not really a concept album, but something that felt like it had a starting point, a middle point, and an ending point, and the songs kind of worked together as opposed to sort of a hodgepodge of things, which is what we had been doing. So yeah, like I think this is probably the best example of one that we really kind of, you know, worked for a long time about what songs are we going to choose, what order are we going to put them in, thinking about the transitions and things like that. So,
and the harmonies, that's probably as far as albums go, since what we had after Sorrowful Mysteries was 2 EPs. Definitely our most in-depth harmonies like we've ever done, I think.
And we got a couple horns in there, which was fun to do. So
Yeah,
you know, just trying to make as big of a sound as possible. Obviously, being in a big studio, you kind of feel compelled to create that big sound, even if there's only 3 of us. It's just a lot of overdubs and, you know, doing different settings, you know, working with the producer to kind of make it, you know, emulate different bands and different eras and things like that. I remember we used like 3 different drum sets to, you know, we would pick which, you know, drum kit would be best for which song. So, you know, we'd never even thought that was something that you could do. But once you're in a big studio, you have more options, you know, more keyboards and more guitars and things like that. Whereas, you know, normally we're just used to playing the same old instruments, so that the songs naturally kind of sound more similar. But when you have more, you know, colors to use, the painting will turn out
exactly a bigger palette.
Bigger palette, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an achievement, and I'm still hearing things new when I listen to it. So it's a really solid. I mean, it's a really good album, and yeah, I definitely recommend people checking that out. It's a great starting point if you want to listen to a whole album. Obviously, like the new EP is something people should check out for sure as well. But that's what I'm hoping. One thing I've been hoping to do with this interview is just give people a kind of an introduction to your overall output, because you've done so many different things over the past decade.
No, definitely, and especially with that album, I don't know. It's interesting that you're still hearing new things, because I think that's definitely possible with like the way that we wrote that album, because we wrote it and then we demoed it and then we took the songs apart, added new sections, added new harmonies, and then demoed it again, took it apart again, and then finally recorded the entire thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of...
Yeah, well, I remember you guys told me that you spent like 3 years with the music, you know, playing it live and stuff, and you just added new sections and changed up the arrangements so you wouldn't get bored. And I remember doing that. I remember hearing that, which was cool. I remember hearing the songs live and then hearing them in a year or two later. And was that section in there before? I think that's awesome.
It's kind of like,
and honestly, I really think you should keep doing that. Like with songs you've already recorded, I think that's like incredibly hip.
Yeah, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, and every time we just choose another option.
Yeah, and we're still kind of doing it when we're in our performances. We have these like new songs that we're playing, and then we'll be at band practice, like preparing for a gig, and we'll just be like, what if we challenge ourselves and we add something totally new to this song? And so like sometimes it will just be as simple as like a harmony, and then sometimes it will just be like a whole new part, So yeah.
Similarly, yeah, we started dipping back into the older songs just to try to revamp them and change them up. So we actually took Put Me Down from our very first album, and we like totally changed it, and then like added a couple different new things in there just to like challenge ourselves. So it's an interesting exercise of like taking a song you wrote, 7 years ago and saying, okay, what would we do with this now, to make it fit in with what we're playing, and just to kind of, what do we want to do to like just kind of spice it up a little bit. So we haven't done too much of that, but I think it's an interesting idea rather than, it's great to work on and write new material, but also it's like just to kind of please people that want to hear the old stuff too, but give it a new sound. So we'll see if we can come up with any more.
Well, I'd love to hear that if you can like record it from a gig or something, because that was one of my favorites that at the time, that song.
Oh, definitely.
On your early gigs. It's worth thinking about because, yeah, as long as you're playing the old stuff for people, why not do new things with it? And
exactly.
Obviously, like this is a part of jazz, but that's more based on the improvisation. But like Duke Ellington would play songs over the same popular hits of his, like Mood Indigo, over decades, but he would do completely different arrangements. I've heard like I think it's like a 10-minute long arrangement of that from later in his career. That's really cool. So it's not just a matter of improvising. He actually like rewrote it, So I think that's like a really hip thing. And it's a good way also of kind of challenging like the dumbness of like the conventions of rock and roll too, where like you're expected to play it exactly as it was on the album. I think that's something that should be challenged. I think that the culture of rock and pop music would be a lot healthier if people weren't expected to recreate the album.
Yeah. It definitely puts like an unneeded pressure on performances. And plus, I don't know, I think if we tried to play like any of those like original songs of ours off of Cutpurse, if we tried to play them like, verbatim, I think we would, not get laughed off the stage, but I think we would laugh. I think we would laugh ourselves off the stage, or just like get so bored because it's just
they're too fast. Too.
We're not there.
We can't play them anymore. We don't have that same energy we used to. We slowed down a little, getting old.
Sorrowful Mysteries. Maybe we can get into some of the specific songs here. You've got a few that are. I mean, the lyrics are. As your career has gone on, your lyrics have gotten more and more deliberate. I suppose. And we talked about this. We talked about all of the songs in our previous interview, but maybe we can talk about some of the ones that are most significant to you still.
Let's see. Whirl has some references to the title of the album, Sorrowful Mysteries, and the whole idea of that was like there are 10 tracks, and the sort of repeated line at the end is the smoke rings blow over me.
Singing your rosary,
merry go round and round, sorrowful mysteries. The idea of sort of being kind of stuck in this, whirl. Like sometimes, you feel like you're going through the motions, repeating all these prayers and, living out your daily life. It's sort of about the monotony of that and, trying to remain faithful and also, optimistic in spite of, the sense of like, you feel kind of like you're just stuck in these gears that are kind of grinding against your will. So,
especially as you get older.
Yeah. When you're in high school, it's like you're kind of forced to go through all these things and you're intaking all this information, but at a certain point you have to make more deliberate choices of like, what do I want to be doing? Why am I doing all of these things and stuff like that? I think is sort of something to think about. And probably, I don't know if we were thinking about it at the time, but that's what it makes me think of now in terms of what the song is. And just the idea of the rosary being sort of that circular, perpetual thing that it's just a cycle, but it's like there's something powerful about that repetition. It just gets under your skin and it informs the way that you think because it's so ingrained.
why Sorrowful Mysteries?
Goes back to the sad hour, I think. Too.
Yeah, it goes back to sad hour.
It's funny because like we would say the rosary sometimes when we were on like long car rides,
tour and stuff.
like to gigs and stuff, and it usually would end up being on a Friday because that's like when you've got gigs, it's Fridays and Saturdays, and Friday is you say the Sorrowful Mysteries on Friday. So I think that Sorrowful Mysteries is definitely like the rosary that we've said the most together.
Yeah.
But then also
yeah.
Go ahead, Seth.
I mean, I definitely remember, like, I don't know if you were in the car, but I was driving, like, somewhere, like, so I was driving, I forget where I was driving, but the name, like, because I didn't come up with the name Sorrowful Mysteries, like the Catholic Church did, or, Jesus, whoever, you know what I mean. Someone was,
Right.
the Holy Spirit spoke to them.
Yeah.
But I remember driving and, like that like was like definitely in my head, and I remember like mentioning it to Brian, I think, first, and I think Brian might have been with me when I was driving somewhere.
I think it's just powerful, like the idea of first of all, the mystery is because it's like, nobody knows what's going on. It's like you're stuck in that circle, like I was talking about. And the fact that it's sorrowful is just like a whole nother element of like, not only are you doing all of these things over and over again, but also it's like, there's just constant sorrow. And it's like, how do you cope with that?
It's striking words to hear for someone who's not Catholic. And then I think for someone who is Catholic to hear Sorrowful Mysteries, it's, there's an intrigue about like, what are these people singing about? What's this album about?
Yeah, and the song, the album is a decade. It's
Right.
10 songs, so it kind of mimics a rosary in that way. And then it's also, we didn't dedicate that one to a saint. That one is for the Mater Dolorosa, the Sorrowful Mother.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about like the fact that we focus on sorrowful things. That's such a big part of Catholic life. And it is such a way of honoring like every part of human life in a way, Obviously, it's focused on Christ's passion with the Sorrowful Mysteries, but there's such a respect for sorrow.
Totally.
I think it's hard to have a healthy respect for sorrow.
It's beautiful and it's intriguing, and it's kind of mysterious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's especially mysterious. They're all mysterious, but that is mysterious in a particular way, in a particularly human way, I guess,
Right.
As well as a supernatural way. And I remember you telling me that it was just like a time of your lives when you were kind of discovering sorrow, like at a deeper level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ones that's very significant for you guys is Friday the 13th. I think that was the first song that was released from the album. There was a video that came out before the album release, and it's a tribute to a friend of yours who passed away, right?
Yeah, as a friend of mine who passed away, and I think that song will always be very prevalent. And I know a lot of people will say how much they like that song. And I think that means a lot to me. And I don't know, just because I don't know, I like to think that he is up there in heaven, and I don't know, I hope he likes that song because it's for him. But I don't know, it's nice to have people kind of remembering him, people that don't know him unintentionally. It was originally a 2-part song, so the first half was Friday the 13th, and the other half was called October, I think. And it took a while. I never thought like those 2 songs were gonna do anything, but then we kind of sewed them together to make this ultimate song. And it doesn't quite catch up with Holy Motors on being the longest song, but it's definitely
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah,
That was a hard one to record too, because like there's all these different. It starts off with just the guitar and the vocals, but it's like kind of builds up to all of these layers and layers. And going back to the idea of like, I think this is probably one of the last ones that we had written for the EP or the album rather. So like we kind of knew the idea of it, and like we had already decided it was called Sorrowful Mysteries. So we're like, we might as well kind of try to, because we put it towards the end of the album. We tried to like make it sort of the bookend to, name dropping it in whirl with the reference to the rosary and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So in the beginning of Friday the 13th, we referenced another sorrowful decade for a sorrowful world, kind of tying back into the rosary theme.
But then with I don't know, so the lyrics that kick off the song, "Out here with my conscience, I don't feel like speaking." I don't know. It's very sad. It's a very sad song to kind of break down. But I think it's just kind of grappling with yourself over, just the loss of a friend, but also, unintentional guilt of could I have done something to prevent this, or did I not do enough, or just how was I so unaware?
Yeah, it's a very moving song, and I found it that way even before knowing the backstory. And again, yeah, I think your most poignant lyrics that you guys have are about friendship.
Oh, I definitely agree.
I still have a hard time listening to that song.
Yeah,
I think it's our most emotional song.
It's definitely one of our favorites from that album, but we would almost never play it live as well, just because it would be hard to tap into that. And also, it's got so many little moving parts that it's like, yeah, we rarely, if ever, have done that one live. So we kind of just like let the recorded version sort of speak for itself.
It's actually also one of the only songs that
Sure.
I think it might be tuned a half step down.
Right. That's another reason why we don't play it live.
Yeah, and there's some pretty difficult vocal parts to do in there. So if we did it in the half step up, it might be a bit of a challenge.
Out here with my conscience, I don't feel speaking. If blood is so ugly, then life is in vain. Another year older, and this is the last mystery, a sorrowful decade for sorrowful walls. On Friday the 13th, someone has a birthday. Don't make them unlucky, just means they need love again. Don't cry for me, darling, for me, Daniel, and don't cry for me, darling, for me, Daniel, and don't cry for me, darling, for me, Daniel, and don't cry for me, darling, for me, Daniel, and don't. Tonight you're on my mind, and for the rest of my life, I feel asleep and think of when you kissed me as we played your song. But now it's done. You said you can't go on I should have flown to your side. If it all levels out, I hope that you'd find a way. I hope so now. And I feel so down, and I can't stop now. Wish you were still here. Tell your arm is here. And the tears fall now, and it won't slow down. Wish you were still here. Tell your arm is
That was just a lyric that like popped into my head, and I don't know why. It makes so
On
much.
Friday the 13th, someone has a birthday.
Yeah, don't make them unlucky. It means they need love, and I mean, it's that lyric still gives me chills. I mean, I don't know if I can say that since I wrote it, but it.
I think you just need a
No,
sweater.
you can because it's God,
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just I don't know. So many people like feel like displaced or unwanted.
Doomed.
Exactly, doomed. Like they're predestined to just fail, and really they just need love or friendship, which is just love.
So you're
again.
saying all you need is love.
All you need is love.
Pretty good. You should write that down.
Yeah.
Your next song, and we talked about this a bit in our older interview, another favorite of mine, of yours, lyrically and musically, Estranged Brother, track 9 on Sorrowful Mysteries, is, again, nobody writes about this stuff. This is a song about a distance growing between brothers, or it could be friends, obviously. It's the sorrows of growing up. It's not just like the it's neither just like the sorrows of like a disillusioned middle-aged person,
Yeah.
or which a lot of literature has, of course, or adolescent angst like you would find in a lot of pop music. It's a very specific learning experience that you have in life.
Yeah, that song was another collaborative one.
Emotionally, really.
Yeah, where we all contributed to the overall writing of the song, and really we're singing about all of our brothers. So it really is more particular to like our actual brothers. I think there's like a little bit of each of our brothers, like both of my brothers, both of Chris's brothers, and all three of Seth's brothers.
No, I think we're the estranged brothers.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, because you write these songs, and I think sometimes, I don't know if it happens with other people when they write songs, but you'll write a song and maybe you don't know what it means, or like you have a meaning for it in the moment, but then years later it means something completely different. And now I kind of use that song to reflect, and it's like, wow, I hope I'm not becoming that estranged brother. And it like kind of shocks me into like remembering like how important like your brothers are. And like, I mean, Chris and Brian are my brothers, and obviously I have actual brothers too.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's about friendship.
But there's a certain experience that you have as you get older. I think a lot of people, if not everybody, has this with family members, that like you can't take it for granted anymore that you're on the same page.
Right.
And it's not even about an overt conflict necessarily. It's just like we're in different places. There's a part of us that can't communicate.
There's so many.
It could be a spiritual thing. And even in a friendship or a brotherhood that has stayed strong and alive, there are just aspects of misunderstanding, or there are aspects of these things that are not solved, this side of the grave. And they're just sorrows that we have to deal with in life, that the lack of perfect unity.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
We agree.
Strange, you're a strange brother, a strange
Brian, your older brother James, I think you said this around the time that this album came out, that you guys have a lot of songs that are sorrowful but hopeful and uplifting.
Yeah.
And I think that definitely comes out in this album. There's like a kind of a purifying aspect of it. Well, let's talk about that song, Never You Mind, this single that came out along with another one called Stable a little bit after Sorrowful Mysteries. And was that one related, when you released this single, was that related to the cancer benefit thing, Chris? Chris, people who haven't heard my interview with Chris way back in episode 5, Chris had to deal with a cancer diagnosis and going through chemo and all that, and he's better now. But that was the inspiration for the next EP, Hospital Dreams. But was this single also connected to that somehow?
So it wasn't originally going to be, but it just happened that when we had recorded it, that whole era sort of came about. So we had these songs that were ready to release, and it was kind of in the thick of that where we just decided to dedicate it to St. Jude and have the money from those songs go to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. So it was kind of like I was saying, we weren't writing those thinking about what was going to come, obviously, because we didn't know, but it just worked out that they kind of, we had something to release during that time that I think fit with, what we were going through. And the idea of because the whole idea was it was like a sort of the old man kind of talking. What you guys can explain
Brian,
that
you've got a
better.
better explanation of that.
For Never You
song, I
Mind
think.
specifically.
The idea is like this old man who's like on his deathbed, and he's kind of just saying,
talking to
talking to like the younger generation, just kind of, don't be like me. I got caught up in frivolous, like the things that don't really matter, like get a job, like go to school, get a job and pay your taxes, and now he's dying and he's really sad,
It's kind of like, in a way, it's sort of acknowledging the fact that yes, there's going to be sorrowful mysteries. You're not going to understand everything, but it's like, you don't have to worry about that, basically. Never you mind all these things that you go through. So it's kind of just, whereas with sorrowful mysteries, we're acknowledging all this stuff happens, and it's like, what are you going to do with it? Never you mind is kind of the answer to that of don't get caught up in the mystery. Don't get too hung up on everything, but just kind of take it as it comes, and just acknowledge that suffering is as much a part of life as anything else. And obviously, like you mentioned, the cancer thing, it happens to so many people, and it's just you can't approach that in the way of feeling bad for yourself. You really just have to, take it a day at a time. And it's the same with anything that you go through, depression or anything like that. It's it's easy to say, you have to, be positive, but that's really the best thing to do, is to just kind of force yourself to not, feel bad for yourself, but rather acknowledge that it could always be worse, which is kind of a morbid way to look at it, but it's true. I mean, you really have to be grateful and just, think of it as a way to grow.
It definitely has has a lot of my favorite lyrics in that song, but some of my favorite are the bridge we do where it goes, how is it?
There comes a time
you get so uncomfortable, which is people are always seeking for comfort, but I don't know, it's good to be uncomfortable in a way.
It's not easy once you get there, and no one ever told me it could be this simple. If you're looking for the answer, well, by that time you'll probably be was always that I'm younger. Logistics are an issue, but they hurt no longer. Once you realize the answer, but by that time you'll probably be dead. But by that time you'll it's hard for you, it's hard for me too. Vanilla humans.
Chris, I interviewed you last year about the EP Hospital Dreams, and
Correct.
this was a unique one in several respects. First of all, it's oriented around a specific experience.
Right.
Secondly, it's just you. I mean, the other guys are on it, but the songs are all written and sung by you.
Mm-hmm.
It's very stripped down in terms of production. It's much more acoustic. You did attribute that partially to being burned out from the epic production of Sorrowful Mysteries.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it does sound very different. I don't want to go, since we already did that interview, I don't want to, spend too much time going into depth on it. But
Sure.
what's how would you describe the overall kind of aesthetic and influence on that one?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was, like you said, it was tied to a specific experience. So it wasn't something we approached with like trying to make a full album. It was just, something that I had wanted to do as sort of a coping mechanism to, just all this free time that I had and, all these random songs that I had sort of been building up during that time period. So just as a way of like capturing that specific instance of my life. And it's just, music is such a good way of capturing a specific moment. So it's something I was talking about Seth with earlier of like, it's dangerous where you have these songs that are tied to memories and moments and experiences that you've had. If you take too long to kind of record them and, make the final version of them, it's like they just kind of like are eating away at you forever and you feel like you need to get those out, but it's like if you never get the chance to do them, it's like you're kind of like stuck in the past almost. So that was a good instance of like I felt like I needed to get some of that stuff out. So I think it's the case with any musician.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have a need to create, but like if you have these things that you've wanted to do for a long time and just never get the chance to, then it's like it kind of can get under your skin a little bit. So yeah, that was just a good instance of like, I felt like we needed to do something with that. And it was a good excuse to experiment with self-recording. So that kind of lends to the stripped down nature of the songs too. So it was a good learning experience. And I'm glad that we were able to get that out of my system basically.
You had a couple of songs referencing Our Lady on
Right.
that EP.
Yeah.
And in both, she appears as kind of the mother watching her son suffer,
right. It always comes back
consoling,
to
consoling,
mother.
but also watching and not preventing it.
Yeah, it's the same sort of sorrowful mother that we evoke on the Sorrowful Mysteries, but again, yeah, more directly related to the passion. So it's just it's a very powerful image, the sorrowful mother, because she endured, more suffering than anyone will ever know. It's just such a unique experience that she went through on this earth. But yeah, I'm glad that we evoked her as one of our patrons. She's a good one to have.
Those two songs I'm referring to, and we talk about that in more detail in the interview back in episode 5. That's All Her Wonder and Turn White, I think, is the other one.
Yeah.
Cut me open, now I'm 24. Every hour I'm awake for one more. Kind of mother wouldn't want to watch the sunshine. What kind of mother would let her son die? What kind of mother would let her son die? The kind of mother that would watch her son rise. The kind of mother that I want to be mine. Do-do-do. Kind of mother that I want to be mine.
You had a bit of a gap, one of the bigger gaps in your output in a while chronologically, and then you've just finally put out this new EP, Take It Back.
Yes,
and
we're taking it back.
again, a bit of a change in your sound, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think there are definitely a lot of new things happening. We're also working with a fantastic producer who
Really.
had lots of ideas. He's crazy and incredibly inspiring to us. A lot of fun to work with. And he'd be like, like that's cool, like, but why don't you completely get rid of that guitar part and play it this way? And it would sound great.
Yeah, his name's Jim Ebert, and he's like, he's a totally, insane man, but like in all the right ways.
Plus, he also runs an organization, or is at least one of the people that runs the organization called Cancer Can Rock. And that was actually a big help with Chris, actually.
Right. It's sort of interesting because that whole era was very strange for us because we were obviously coming out of the cancer period and not really sure what we were going to do in terms of the next step for the band. But we happened to be playing at this Beatles cover show, and Cancer Can Rock was one of they were doing some sort of fundraiser there. So, and basically how their organization works is they sponsor artists and musicians that are going through cancer or had cancer, and they bring them into a studio to record a song totally free of charge. And they kind of, let the cancer patient sort of, run the show and kind of create this piece of music that they might not normally get to. So we were lucky enough to, be able to work with them. So it was kind of a weird instance of I was like, maybe I should just go talk to them and, tell them about my story a little bit. So that's how we met this producer, Jim, and ended up recording this song Fight Back with him, and then ended up doing the full EP. But it's another thing of we probably would not have been in that place if it hadn't been for the, going through the cancer. And so it was just an instance of kind of good coming from a bad situation. And it worked out pretty fortuitously of the EP sounded great. And it was just, I don't know what we would have done if we didn't work with Jim, but
we definitely wouldn't have, even if we had these songs, they definitely wouldn't sound the way that they do. And I don't know, there's just so many great synth tones, which I feel like we don't have a lot on other albums. And there's just, it's hard sometimes to accept that a certain guitar part you won't be able to play live because there's just the three of us, but there's just some really great guitar parts or crazy, choir-esque harmonies that we were, sometimes we prepared them beforehand or we're just creating them on the spot. And Chris actually plays bass for all the songs on that except for Fight Back, and they're some of my favorite bass parts.
It's true.
It's a lot of fun.
Bass is so good.
Yeah.
I think
it's great.
Oh yeah. The there's definitely something good about recording yourself and having that total control, but I think having sort of a skilled, experienced producer at the helm to be kind of provide a sense of they haven't had been sitting with these songs for so long, so they get sort of a different perspective and they can be you could do it that way, you could do it this way. So it's it's helpful. It's kind of the George Martin effect of giving it sort of an outside perspective to shape the songs. And we're a little bit hesitant to that because we're so attached to these songs and we always think we know what's best, but it's good to kind of let go and discover things that you might not normally. So that was a good learning experience as well.
Sure. Yeah. So Fight Back was that one also it's specifically related to the cancer experience as well, but more from the other guy's perspective.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of one of those ones where, again, it would be something that we've been working on for a while, and it just happened that it sort of fit into the experience that was going around us. So it was something that might not necessarily have been directly about that, but ended up fitting in with what we were going through, and ended up being the perfect choice for the song to record with Cancer Can Rock, and we ended up putting it on the EP. So there's a lot of back songs on there: Fight Back, Hold Back Love, Take It Back.
Right.
Can we ever go back to the ways of yesterday?
Yeah, this is our back era.
Fight Back was the one that I played at the beginning of this interview, and it was is that true? Not yet, but anyway,
It will be.
That one is sort of about if somebody is to an extent too weak to do their fighting, and I don't mean to say you're weak, Chris, but sort of physical weakness,
Sure.
in the case of an illness,
Right.
there is a certain extent to which you want to, and a lesser, but still real extent to which you actually can, fight that fight vicariously for your loved one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Jesus did when he carried the cross.
I was going to say Samwise Gamgee, but I guess that's a little more on the nose there.
Samwise Jesus.
Yeah. Who came first?
Okay, I'm going to cut that part too. So
That's pretty good.
So talk about the opening track today. What did you say? The Buggos were the big influence on that?
Yes, the Buggos.
The monkeys, yeah.
Well, at least the opening.
Yeah, definitely, yeah, the opening. But then I think it gets pretty
It's kind of got a Turtles thing too.
yeah, definitely with the baz.
Tapping back into the Bapa Bas.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
They always come back.
Yeah, it's a very of our songs. Like you want to talk all about us. Taking influence from the older generations, but not sounding like we're replicating anything. But I feel like that song is the closest we get to sounding like retro, because of that like Bapa Bas section.
Right, and it's like deliberate too. We're not trying to be like, hey, check out this.
New idea.
Innovative. It's like, no, the song is about evoking the past. So we're very clearly trying to be like, hey, this is Daydream Believer, but revamped a little bit.
Right.
So, but then of course at the end, it just like goes crazy and gets wild.
It's kind of dark.
That end section is probably like one of my favorite things that we've ever recorded. Yeah. If you just, have the time, put some headphones on and really just loop that end section, there are some fantastic harmonies that happen there and just crazy, a crazy like Moog synthesizer is doing all sorts of weird wobbly sounds.
Our very first fade out too.
Yeah,
Brian's been gunning for the fade out for a long time. And we got a nice long fade out. Yep. So
that's the first one, huh?
I think so. Yeah, you wanted to.
I've been literally since Cut Purse. I finally got my fade out.
It's the only one we faded out too. Yes. No, it's true. The whole idea of that song is just like the music of today is like.
Yeah. Well, I have this theory. Okay, so to go back to like the drug use is that like, okay, so people started using drugs, it started influencing their music. And like at first it was like really cool. But like as time has progressed and like as the drugs have become like much more dangerous and like, not that they were always dangerous, but like, things have just gotten a lot weirder. It's kind of, in my eyes, taken like a toll on the music and that the music has started to go downhill as well. Because like they're still using the drugs, but the quality of the music is getting worse. And so it's kind of this lament of like the music of today. It's like, can we ever go back to the way of yesterday? That being a direct reference to Yesterday by Paul McCartney, because it's such a fantastic song. And so then to go along with the idea also of like, we don't need to take the drugs. All these artists are taking drugs and they're writing terrible music today. We don't need to. We're not going to. And we can write,
Yeah, we can write terrible music without taking drugs.
Yeah. Right.
It's almost like they take the drugs and then try to write the music rather than like they're writing something. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of the reason why people back then were doing drugs were for many reasons, but also like, I know I'd like to, expand my mind. And so they would be writing these fantastic songs.
I think the drugs is a big part of it, but it's not even necessarily the only contributing factor. Like there's a loss of melody, big cultural shift that happened in the 60s that is a part of, drugs was a part of it, but also it's just kind of like a self-obsessed sort of nature that, I don't know, took over during that time as well. And the modern era with people so obsessed with
themselves,
social media and technology, I think is another, it's kind of a drug in a way that we haven't really categorized as such, but it's like that obsession with, always being aware of what's happening on your phone and things like that. It's like that influences the music, whether or not people realize it. So it's like,
totally.
I think that is a contributing factor.
And Seth is right, that there is like a huge, right now we're experiencing a huge loss of melody. And it's like a very funny trend. But that's even more poignant about like talking about Yesterday by Paul McCartney, because I think I had read it in a piece written by like a professor of music at Christendom.
Yeah, so the music director at Christendom College, Kurt Podorak, had a blog where he was writing critiques of pop music for just like a summer.
And he talked about he used Yesterday as a reference and said how like that song, because like it's like if you just took the melody, like if you just cut everything out and you just sang that melody, it's still like a great song,
Yes, that's true.
And he was saying like that's his definition of like a great piece of music, is if you could just take everything out, and just have the melody,
and there's
still
not much there to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, you can have things that are just dependent on harmony, to a certain degree, but I think when it gets to being dependent on texture and production, that's when there starts to be very little substance.
Right. And it's funny, it's even carrying over into like the movies, like movie soundtracks and video game soundtracks as well. I mean, like you'll see these videos of like the composers for like Marvel movies talking about how like they're like given specific instruction not to write melodic pieces, because they just want this kind of like bland orchestra music in the background. And it's sad. It's like, it's kind of,
It's just tones.
Yeah. It's this like weird death of melody that is kind of happening in our culture right now.
And I think going back to the thing about like nostalgia or like having a band that can only do one thing, you guys, I don't think you ever set out to be like this type of band. You're just a band. You definitely work within a certain tradition, a certain time span of influences that are your primary influences, but you were never like, we're gonna be this vibe. We're gonna like cater to this audience which misses this kind of music.
Yeah, definitely
No,
not.
we didn't want to be like a revivalist band or hearken to the oldies kind of band.
No, yeah, we've always...
Yeah, you're not LARPers.
We're not. That's a very good use of that word. Yeah, we're not just LARPing around with all this
totally.
old music. That's very interesting.
Yeah,
very funny.
we're covering the songs that we want to cover for the most part.
Reimagining.
Yeah, and then we're writing the music that we want to write.
Yeah, and insofar as you do kind of refer to bands of the past, it's more just like the standards. That's the standard that's been set. Like, yes, you are influenced by the Beatles stylistically, to be sure, but it's also just the standard that they've set of harmonization and stuff like that. You're not solely trying to recreate that for its own sake, but it's more like this is inspiring.
Yeah.
Right. Well put.
A lot of being inspired by them, but it's also a lot of, I don't know, trying to write something better than them or like bands that we love, which is very driving.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like kind of funny to try to write something better than one of the greatest bands ever.
I mean, it's like the competition between Brian Wilson and
yeah, exactly.
it's like the Pet Sounds was inspired by Revolver and Sgt. Pepper and everything like that.
Mhm.
So, you try to keep up the tradition, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't think that we're ever going to top anything like that, but you try to write something that you think can, be in that same sort of tradition as these albums that.
Yeah, it's like a friendly competition
Exactly,
of
yeah.
inspiration.
Which I think we have in
Yeah.
band as well. Like as all three of us are songwriters, I think we have a friendly competition.
Totally.
I feel like with us, I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way, but like with Chris, Brian, and I, it's a friendly competition, but it's also just, I don't know, I'm inspired when Chris or Brian writes a great song or a great part, and then, I want to top that, or I want to write a part that's even better than that, but in a complimenting way.
No, it's true. I like Carole King is a huge influence for me, and she for a long time worked in like a cubicle setting where like, she would just have to write these pop songs for other people. But like there were other musicians that worked in the office too. And so there was like a cubicle next to her. And so she would listen to like what the person next to her was writing, and she would like try to write something better than them. And like, they would like steal ideas from each other and whatnot. But it was all friendly, and they were all just kind of like working off of each other. And so that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it goes back to the friendship once again.
That's something that I think has been lost. It's just something I've just been thinking about recently in the era of copyright, and also in the era of like the hook being the most important thing about a piece of music.
Yeah.
That kind of like just being able to like literally just take a melody somebody else wrote and do your own thing with it has kind of been lost. That was a huge part of the classical tradition. There's just so much quoting and ripping off, so to speak, in the history of classical music. And of course, there's plenty of ripping off in pop music too. But there's less of a sense of like, oh, I can just like take this, and there's no shame in just like, I can rip this riff and from somebody and just do something totally different with it.
Yeah, exactly. And if the whole world was Catholic, then we would all understand that like it's all coming from God anyways. So we don't have any like intellectual property over anything, and that like we're allowed to recreate new melodies and work with what God has already given us.
Oh, I could cry if I thought that it would get me by. can we ever go back to the way of yesterday? On our way to yesterday. Today will be the death of me. Today will be the death of me. And now I cry. What a perfect time to be alive. When the music won't get me high. Are we using what we used to? Will we ever go wrong? Now we'll never go